Sit with me for a while. I want to speak to you about something that almost every man experiences, though few ever name it. You've probably felt it, that strange sense that you're moving through life, doing the things expected of you, yet somewhere inside, something hasn't moved in years. It's like an inner freeze. You work, you achieve, you manage, but part of you feels cut off from warmth, from depth, from feeling alive. That's what I mean when I say emotionally stuck. You're not broken. You're simply trapped inside strategies that once kept you safe. What protected the boy has imprisoned the man. And to free yourself, you have to understand how those strategies formed, what they cost, and how to integrate what they've been guarding. Jung wrote that nothing so promotes growth as the integration of what was once avoided. Today we'll talk about 3 of the most common emotional traps men fall into, how they disguise themselves as strength, how they drain vitality, and how to begin turning them into presence. 1. The trap of control. The first trap is control. Control feels powerful. It looks disciplined, competent, decisive, but underneath it's often fear wearing armor. When a man can't tolerate uncertainty, he builds a fortress of control to keep chaos away, planning every move, managing every variable, tightening his grip on outcomes and people. The problem is that control doesn't protect life. It squeezes the life out of it. You see it in small ways. Impatience when plans change, irritation when someone else takes the lead, and almost physical discomfort when emotion enters the room. These aren't personality quirks. They're survival responses. Somewhere early on you learned that the world became unpredictable when adults lost control. Maybe a parent's anger turned rooms cold. Maybe love was given one day and withheld the next. So you made a vow, I will never let things get out of hand again. That vow gave you order. It helped you succeed. It may have built your career, but it also cost you intimacy and spontaneity, because control is a wall that blocks not only danger, but connection. You can't selectively numb chaos. When you shut out uncertainty, you also shut out wonder. Jung would say control is the ego's attempt to rule what belongs to the self, the larger intelligence of psyche and life. The more the ego tightens its grip, the more exhausted it becomes. The mature man learns containment instead of control. Containment says, I can hold uncertainty without being consumed by it. That's real strength. A steady hand, not a clenched fist. When you catch yourself over-controlling, pause and ask, what am I afraid would happen if I didn't? You'll usually find a much younger fear beneath the surface, the boy who equated looseness with danger. The work isn't to shame him, it's to reassure him that the adult can now do what the child couldn't, stay present inside uncertainty. Control is the first trap. It promises safety. It delivers isolation. 2. The trap of numbness. The second trap is numbness, the silent killer of aliveness in men. Most men don't choose numbness consciously. It happens slowly. A disappointment here, a heartbreak there, a humiliation that wasn't allowed to be felt. Each one adds a layer of armor. Eventually you start mistaking the armor for skin. You tell yourself you're fine, you function, you even smile. But underneath, your emotional life is on mute. Jung called this psychic anesthesia the loss of feeling function. When emotion becomes too painful or too inconvenient, the psyche shuts the door on it to preserve order. The problem is that the door doesn't open selectively. When you close off grief, you also close off joy. When you suppress fear, you also dull curiosity. When you mute sadness, you mute love. You'll recognize numbness not by how calm you feel, but by how little truly moves you. You laugh, but it doesn't linger. You achieve, but it doesn't satisfy. You love, but you can't quite surrender. You feel about feelings, but rarely through them. Many men learned numbness as a virtue. They were told to be logical, strong, in control, but logic without feeling becomes sterility, and strength without tenderness becomes brutality. Jung observed that emotion is not weakness, it's energy. It's the psyche's way of communicating meaning. When you cut it off, you disconnect from purpose. Where does numbness begin? Often in a home where emotions were dangerous, where crying earned ridicule, or vulnerability earned distance. The boy learned that to feel is to risk pain, so he built an inner freezer. It worked, but that same freezer left unchecked now turns life gray. The antidote is not to force feeling, but to allow presence, to stay with experiences long enough for emotion to thaw naturally. If you can bear even a small amount of real sadness or joy or longing, you are already healing, because feeling, once allowed, begins to move on its own. Numbness promises peace. What it delivers is exile, exile from your own depth. 3. The trap of performance. The third trap is performance. If control is about mastering the outer world and numbness about surviving the inner one, performance is about earning worth. It's the belief that identity must be proven again and again through achievement, image, or approval. Performance is seductive because it feels productive. It keeps you moving, but what drives it isn't ambition, it's fear. The fear that who you are, as you are, isn't enough. The man trapped in performance lives by invisible metrics. The next project, the next compliment, the next conquest. He's not chasing success, he's chasing relief from shame. Jung saw this pattern everywhere in modern men, the inflation of the persona. The persona is the social mask we build to function in the world. It's necessary. But when the mask becomes the master, the man disappears. Everything becomes a show. The good son, the competent professional, the charismatic leader, the endlessly self-improving male. Beneath all that polish often lives a tired, unseen human being who doesn't know how to rest without guilt. In ordinary life, performance shows up when you can't stop working even after the goal is met, when silence feels unbearable, when the thought of being average terrifies you. It's the constant inner whisper, do more or you'll be forgotten. Performance isn't evil, it's adaptive. As a boy, you probably earned love through achievement. The praise felt good, the approval felt safe. Over time, that became your identity. But adult life asks for a different currency. It asks for authenticity, for contribution that comes from truth, not insecurity. When you finally slow down and let the applause fade, you meet a strange silence. It can feel like death. But in that silence is the birth of selfhood. That's the moment the real man begins to form, the one who acts from purpose, not pressure. Performance promises validation. It delivers exhaustion. How these traps work together. Control, numbness, and performance feed each other. Control prevents vulnerability. Numbness hides the pain of control. Performance masks the emptiness left by both. Together they form a closed circuit that keeps a man busy, efficient, admired, and profoundly disconnected. This is why success alone doesn't heal men, because the traps operate beneath achievement. You can have the perfect career, the family, the home, and still feel that quiet ache. Why do I feel nothing? The answer isn't that something is wrong with you. It's that something in you stopped moving long ago, waiting for permission to feel again. Jung believed that emotional stagnation is the psyche's cry for integration. The energy locked in these traps doesn't vanish. It waits to be reclaimed. When you begin to turn toward them, not to fix, but to understand, they start transforming on their own. Control becomes steadiness, numbness becomes sensitivity, performance becomes service. Origins and the boy who stayed. Every trap traces back to a boy who adapted brilliantly to his environment. If his parents were unpredictable, he learned control. If they were volatile, he learned numbness. If their love was conditional, he learned performance. These were not failures. They were acts of genius for survival. But adaptation has an expiration date. The strategy that saved the child constrains the man. At some point, life demands an upgrade from survival to presence. And this is where most men get lost. They keep applying the child's strategy to the adult's world. Jung wrote that individuation, becoming whole, requires separating from the parental psyche. That doesn't mean rebellion, it means differentiation. You begin to see that your reactions today are not solely responses to the present, but echoes of yesterday. When your partner criticizes you and you feel 10 years old again, that's the boy surfacing. The work is not to exile him further, but to acknowledge his fear and remind him, you're safe now, I've got this. Reparenting isn't a technique, it's a posture of inner leadership. The adult self becomes the father that the child needed, consistent, calm, and kind. And that inner father begins to free you from the three traps, one by one. Contact without collapse. To face these traps, you need contact, the willingness to see them without collapsing into shame. When you catch yourself micromanaging, numbing out, or performing for approval, resist the urge to judge. Instead, observe. Say to yourself, this reaction is older than this moment. That sentence alone introduces awareness, and awareness begins the thaw. Men often fear that if they stop performing, they'll lose their edge, that if they let emotion surface, it will drown them. But contact doesn't erase strength. It refines it. It replaces the frantic energy of defense with the quiet power of authenticity. Contact feels uncomfortable because it strips away distraction. It reveals boredom, grief, loneliness, all the emotions that have been waiting for acknowledgement. Stay long enough and they begin to tell their story. Beneath every trapped emotion lies intelligence. Beneath every defense lies a truth about what you valued and what you lost. To contact emotion without collapse is to hold it the way a good parent holds a frightened child, firmly enough to protect, gently enough to let it breathe. Containment before expression. Containment is what turns contact into growth. It means holding emotion consciously until it reveals its shape. Men who skip containment either explode or shut down. One loses control, the other loses connection. Containment is the middle path. A man with containment can feel anger without aggression, sorrow without self-pity, fear without paralysis. He doesn't discharge emotion, he digests it. That digestion becomes wisdom. Jung compared this to alchemy, transforming base matter into gold through heat and patience. Containment makes you trustworthy, to others and to yourself. When you can feel fully without acting impulsively, you become a safe presence in any room. That's what real maturity feels like, not coldness, but composure. Consequences of avoidance versus integration. Avoidance offers short-term comfort but long-term decay. You can ignore emotion for years, but the bill always comes due in burnout, resentment, or emptiness. Relationships suffer first because intimacy demands emotional availability. Work follows because creativity depends on inner movement. Eventually the body joins in. Tension, fatigue, illness, all ways the psyche says, wake up. Integration, though painful, restores vitality. When you allow emotion to move, you regain access to the full range of human energy. Grief that deepens empathy, fear that sharpens awareness, anger that clarifies boundaries, joy that renews meaning. The goal isn't to feel good, it's to feel real. A man integrated with his emotions doesn't become sentimental. He becomes stable. He knows the terrain of his own heart. He can lead others through storms because he's faced his own. Archetypal framing, the magician and the king. In Jung's map, the work of emotional integration belongs to the magician and the king. The magician represents insight, self-observation, and transformation. He's the inner alchemist who turns raw emotion into understanding. When you cultivate reflection, when you can step back and say, this is my control pattern again, or this numbness is trying to protect me, you are activating the magician. Awareness itself is magic. But awareness without structure becomes chaos. That's where the king enters. The king brings order and blessing. He governs the inner kingdom so that emotions have a place but not a throne. He sets boundaries. Anger, you may speak, but you will not rule. Fear, you may warn, but you will not command. When the magician and the king work together, emotion becomes servant rather than master. The man who embodies them no longer fears feeling. He uses it as information, as art, as empathy. His authority becomes both strong and warm, a rare combination that people instinctively trust. Responsibility and witness. Emotional maturity isn't a solo conquest. You need witness, people who can hold your truth without flinching. Men who have faced their own shadows can meet yours with respect instead of judgment. In their presence, the masks fall away, and what's left is brotherhood. Not performance, not competition, but recognition. Responsibility means you stop waiting for life to make you feel. You start showing up to feel life yourself. It means admitting when you're in a trap and choosing honesty over habit. Some days you'll regress. That's fine. The point isn't perfection. It's reliability. Showing up again, aware, grounded, willing to learn. Every time you meet emotion consciously, you reclaim energy from the unconscious. That energy becomes clarity, depth, and quiet power, the hallmarks of a man who is no longer stuck. The three traps, control, numbness, performance, are not enemies. They're teachers that arrived too early. They were born in fear and loyalty. When you stop hating them, they start revealing their wisdom. Control taught you discipline. Numbness taught you endurance. Performance taught you excellence. Now, as an adult, you get to keep their gifts and release their chains. You don't need to become a new man. You need to become a whole one. A man who feels without drowning, leads without dominating, and loves without losing himself. So when you feel that familiar tightness, that urge to clamp down or tune out, remember, that's the old code trying to protect you. Thank it. Then choose presence instead. Because the world doesn't need more men who hide behind competence. It needs men who are emotionally alive, men who can meet life with both spine and heart. Be that man. Not perfectly, reliably, begin.